Over the past 2 decades, there have been about 500,000 cases of traumatic brain injuries in veterans reported. That doesn't take into account the ones that were not. What I'm going to share with you today is deeply personal. And some would ask why I would do this, why I would dig into my family's past, my childhood, leading up to today, and drudge these things up because they are deeply emotional for me. It took me a lot of years to be able to identify what these childhood things were like with my dad and both my grandfathers and my older brother, and I'm going to get into that. The reason why I'm doing this is twofold. One, maybe somebody else out there that may watch this was like me. I'll be 50 this month. It's October. Maybe they have family members that are like this. Maybe they want to get more involved in veterans initiatives that advocate for traumatic brain injuries and things that can be done outside of the VA's purview. This is coming from multiple fronts, but honestly, it's therapy for me. I don't share a lot of these things. I talk about my dad and my brother and my grandfathers and their service when I speak, but I don't get into a lot of some of these things that I experienced as a child and even as an adult with people who have traumatic brain injuries and PTS and what that can look like on a family. And for those of you who know me and follow me on social media or know me personally, family is everything to me. And the things that they see me do and they see me talk about are wildly important to me. Because if we don't talk about them, if we keep them compressed, if we compartmentalize and ignore and override, there's only so long that can happen. When I talk about post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, it's not from a place of experiencing it. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm simply telling you what my personal experiences are as a child, growing up with a father that has it, being the younger brother to someone who has it, and what those outcomes look like. And my opinion on these things is the person that's involved in this without the actual trauma. And as I look back on my childhood, both my grandfathers were World War II vets, very distant with things, very shut off with a lot of things. They didn't discuss what had happened to them or what they went through in World War II with any of this. When we were kids, we knew that my grandfather served, but we didn't get into things. You could tell looking back on it now, they've both been gone for quite some time now, but looking back when I was a kid, Christmases and things and being distant and arm's length from everybody. And you can tell that there were things there were demons that they never dealt with, that my grandmother had to deal with. And a lot of it wasn't good. There's some great times in my childhood, but a lot of those times that I remember my grandmother having issues, looking back now, I bet were from that post-traumatic stress. And there's only so much the human brain can take. There's only so much that we can compress and ignore and override. And trust me, in my family, the males are pros at it, including me. At some point, the top has to blow off, so to speak. And I've seen that. If I look back when I was a child with my father, couldn't touch him when he was sleeping. He had night terrors, still does to this day, and he's 76 years old. I never knew about his time in Vietnam until I was in my probably 30s. A lot of that I had to do self-discovery on. He did not talk about it. I have little tidbits and things like that, but I would have to go do my research on it. It's simply because they don't want to talk about it, right? It drudges up all these memories of the things that happen when you spend that time in a god-awful place like that, doing god-awful things that your government tells you need to do because you're 19 years old and don't know any better. And look, I'm glad that he did it. It has led us to where we are today and who I am and how he raised me, how he raised my brother, who he is as a human being, for all the faults, but it's still his story. I feel like I have a responsibility to share those stories with people because I love storytelling. You know, there were times when I was a kid that it was always the joke, don't touch dad when he's asleep. I remember getting slapped around a couple of times when we didn't adhere to those warnings and getting knocked across a room or scared the crap out of, literally, because he would be in that panic mode in his sleep. And it's just stress. It was all that stress from being in Vietnam and all the things that they saw and did. I didn't recognize any of this until I was older. I'm looking back going, yeah, maybe that's why he did what he did. That's why he chose that way, or that's why he had marital issues. And I'll never forget this. And this is right before I got married to my wife, who is a saint for dealing with us. My dad asked me, did his failures in his marriages and as a father affect me not waiting till I was 38 years old to get married? And 100% it did. But here's the thing, and this is what I tell him and everybody else. You can't turn back the clock. I can't turn back to when I was 10, 11, 12, 15, whatever. You can't do that. You deal with it and then you move on. We all change. We all live this cycle. Some people stay put. Most people don't. My father has not. Thank God. My kids get to see a grandfather who is not like the father that I had when I was a kid. That strict disciplinarian who was never around. we also have to put it in context of the things he experienced, and we can't use it as an excuse, but it is there. So what I want people to understand is if you have a loved one that has trauma to that level, post-traumatic stress, there are triggers. Educate yourself. You go to therapy too. Learn how to deal with people with PTSD. I've done that. I've talked to counselors. I've talked to people who deal with traumatic brain injuries, whether they be in the nonprofit space, neuroscience, things like that, to try to gain a better knowledge of what goes on, because that's the only thing that I can control. I can't control how they react to things. And if anybody who have seen me talk about my brother or posts and things like that, he and I are 4 years apart. We grew up beating the crap out of each other like all brothers do. Times we hated each other, not really, but we perceived to hate each other. We beat each other up. I beat him up with a bat one time. He broke my nose. That's what brothers do. But he was always my protector. And I wrote a poem about his first combat deployment that I'll share with you guys at some point. I'm not an artist. I don't do that. Just things that came out of my head, knowing that the guy who protected me for all those years was going to war by choice. But he's still going to war. I'll never forget this. People telling me and seeing him when he came back from his first combat deployment, that's not the son that we sent off to war. And I was 15, 14 at the time. I didn't care. I didn't care about shit. I didn't really recognize those things until we got into our older years. And I'm thinking, what in the is wrong with you? What is up? Something's, and just all these crazy things, outbursts and distancing and getting mad and going from 0 to 100 and just all these things. But now I look back on it and I get it. I don't fully understand it because I'm still trying to, but I get it. There was a time where I don't know what happened, frankly, but he just checked out of our family completely. Just stopped talking to everybody. That was over 20 years ago. And all of a sudden it was gone. I watched my parents suffer because of it, my mother especially, and trying to figure out why. No one ever knew why. That's the worst part. He just wanted to crawl in a hole. And evidently at the time, that's what he thought was best for him. That's the way he could deal with it, to silence the noise in his head. He never saw me get married. He never saw his nephews born. He never saw any of those things. He missed 20 plus years of my parents' life. My dad's got Parkinson's. His time is limited on this earth, and I've come to terms with that. So he missed all of that. 20 years gone, poof. And 20 years gone of a man that understands him the most. And, there were times during that 20 years I'd forgotten that I even had a brother. I blocked it out mentally, like it didn't even dawn on me until someone would ask me about it. Because that was my self-defense mechanism. What I'll say is that people heal. I was never mad. I was mad in the beginning. It is what it is. And that's the attitude that we had to take. Fast forward 20 plus years, about 2 weeks ago, my older brother showed up at my father's doorstep. No call, no nothing, just showed up. Hey, Pops, how you doing? And of course, my dad was beside himself, happy. A lot of hugs, a lot of tears, a lot of truth that he spoke to him about what happened, suffering from traumatic brain injuries. There's issues he's been going to the VA about finally after all these years. And, it was just, in his words, it was just time. And I have mixed emotions about it. I'm happy for my father, happy that my father got that closure, that he got to reconnect with his son, who probably experienced some of the same things he did, not to the level of Vietnam and the Gulf War, but it's still war. And he goes and sees my mother, which he was elated about. Lots of crying, lots of tears, lots of hugging, lots of explanations and reminiscing, so to speak. Lots of truths come out. I haven't talked to him. I haven't spoken to him since all of this. I'm in Texas, they're in Oklahoma. To be honest with you, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think I'm still mad because the guy who is supposed to protect me left. So I don't really know how to feel about it. But I will say this, that time does heal a lot of wounds, and we're just in the beginning stages of this. But so for those of you out there who may have lost loved ones, not literally, but to traumatic brain injury, when they become a different person, when they have PTSD that they don't even recognize themselves, there is hope. There is hope for that. And my hope for you is that you get to experience the reconnection of that loved one, whoever that might be. But just make sure that you deal with it in the right way. And I am looking forward to the time that my brother and I reconnect. There's a lot of 20 years worth of things in there. There's probably some anger in it. There's going to be some truth in it, but he's still me, that kid who always defended me as a kid. He's still that person that I could always rely on. And his service to this country changed that. And that's okay. We're going to deal with it. If you're out there and you have loved ones, there are lots of resources out there. Of course, we advocate for the Brain Treatment Foundation. We've had quite a few friends go through that program and have come out on the other side amazing, but it takes your help to do it. So I'm not one to sit here and ask for money for those things, but they need your help. There's a lot of veterans out there like my brother, a lot of these men and women have gone through this program who are still on this earth because of it. So find something like that if that speaks to you. But there's a lot of resources out there on the va.gov, on independent neuro studies that have done studies about traumatic brain injuries that will do things outside the VA's purview, because the VA may consider them experimental, which is a joke. We all know that, but they're still there. I am asking you to go do that. There are people out there like my father, like my brother, like my two grandfathers who need your help. And the only way for them to get to be the old version of themselves is to get their brain healthy. So I hope this helps people. I hope you get something out of it. If you need assistance, if you need help, please do not hesitate to reach out to me through whatever social channel you may see this on, because there is hope for those who want it. I'm here to help you find it.